Um, this is a picture of Ed Norman. Before he went to war. And I'm reading an article by David Brooks, and David Brooks is a columnist with the Times since 2003. He is the author of The Road to Character and a forthcoming book called The Second Mountain. And he wrote this article, published in 2018, called Fighting the Spiritual Void. And one of the main ideas of the David Brooks article is that trauma is a moral and a spiritual issue as much as a psychological or a chemical. And he says that wherever Americans gather to try and help each other on any deep level, they confront levels of trauma that their training has not prepared them for. Our society has tried to medicalize trauma. We call it PTSD and regard it as an individual illness that can be treated with medication. But it's increasingly clear that trauma is a moral and a spiritual issue as much as a psychological or chemical one. Wherever there is trauma, there is, in the case of a soldier, a moral injury. And the moral injury is doing things that you're not supposed to do, like killing. And the inner self of the soldier is traumatized, and the main example that David Brooks uses is the movie Saving Private Ryan, which is about Omaha Beach. And there's a scene with Tom Hanks, and he feels, in Saving Ryan, he says to his wife, "Tell me I'm a good man." Okay, so there's an inner condemnation, I think, in the inner life of the soldier that feels that his acts were morally reprehensible. And I think my father had this inner critic that felt that he wasn't a good person, that he was morally tainted. And the article goes on to say that in ancient cultures, when men went off to war and they came back after they had done horrible things and spilled blood, they came back to a purification. And he says, returning soldiers are put through purification rituals, and they are given a chance to cleanse, purify, and rejoin the community. And David Brooks is saying, we have privatized PTSD. The soldier has to deal with it by themselves, and it's not really possible. The soldier needs to be welcomed back into the community. There needs to be a purification, a cleansing, and a welcoming back ritual. Okay, this is what ancient cultures did because they knew the horrendous burden of going to war, and that the soldier or the warrior spills blood. But what David Brooks says is that the community would take possession of the guilt of the soldiers, and the soldiers did things on their behalf. Okay, so in my case, I'm sorry, in the Norman family's case, is that Ed Norman committed acts of war and violence on our behalf. And he suffered an interior wounding, a moral wound. And it goes right into the soul of the person. But just to go back to the idea of the older ancient cultures welcoming the lawyer back, the warrior back, and giving them a purification, and sometimes they're isolated from the community for a while before they return and reintegrate. And the idea is that the community accepts the grief. And the community realizes that the warrior went to war on their behalf. And so this is so brilliant, and it's something that Western culture doesn't have. We don't bring the soldier back into community, and that's why my father drank. And we never brought him back into community. He was alienated. The idea of the article is that the guilt belongs to everybody. What my father did, he did for Francis so he could get married. He did for the Allies. He did it for the Jews who were in concentration camps. He was with General Patton in the Third Army. He was 2 weeks in the Battle of the Bulge. He had to commit acts of war. It was a war zone. And I have been dealing with my father's wound, and I've really purified a lot of it in my own spiritual practice. But there's a part that has to do with the community, and there's a part that has to do with the warrior's children, is that the warrior's children should be honored and taken care of because of what the warrior did on behalf of the community and the family. And it says that we need more rites of passage and more communal moments when we celebrate a moral transition. And in the case of the ancient societies, is that the warrior comes, has a purification for many days, and then they have a transition back into the culture. And so that purification time creates a moral transition to be reintegrated into the culture. Now, that is really brilliant, and that's what indigenous cultures did. And it's in the article, he's saying it's very sad because we privatize PTSD, and we need to. I'm always looking for a way to redeem my father's image, because we saw him as an alcoholic. We did not know why he drank. And the idea is that he never got the help he needed. He was never received back into community, and he never had the feeling of a new moral beginning. And this was our fault as a community, as a family, that we did not have the knowledge or the compassion or the wisdom to do things to integrate my father back into the family. And this is called a spiritual void, where the soldier is responsible for everything he did in the war. And that's too big. That was too much weight on my father, that he never received a purification and a cleansing, that he did his acts on behalf of the community, on behalf of us, in order to put Hattie into a house and send his pension back to Grandma Hattie. So it's very short-sighted not to recognize the huge sacrifice my father went through. And reading this article about the spiritual void because it's in our culture. We don't know how to handle trauma. We don't welcome people back. We don't recognize what they've done for us. And to me, this is very profound because it's showing that there's steps. They use the idea of the hero's journey, and the hero's journey is, it's like a departure, and an adventure, and then a return. And so the idea is to create the cycle of the hero's adventure where you depart, you have the adventure, and you return. And so my father never was able to return to the community. He felt morally tainted.